In the last video I mentioned that I had a pretty good monster planned for the letter N. Well, this is not it. Don't get me wrong, the creature we'll be discussing now is an interesting one as well, but it wasn't my original plan. I guess that unnamed beast shall remain a mystery for now. Yeah, not very thrilling, but I'd like to keep it a surprise until I get around to taking a look at it. Anyway, let's focus on the thing we have on our proverbial autopsy table right now. The Ningyo. It's a creature of Japanese origin, its name meaning human fish. There is some variation on what it looks like exactly, but it is always an amalgamation of human and fish body parts. One of the most common depictions entails said animal from the gills down, with the head of a human complete with hair, a monkey's mouth, and small often pointy teeth. Its scales have a golden shine and it emits a sound resembling a flute. However, it may also have thin humanoid or monkey arms, as well as torso with the already described, or a simple fish head. It is meant to be monstrous and ugly, unlike the western combination of people and fish, but the influence of mermaids has already altered how Ningyos look. Modern depictions are generally more like the European imagery, and indeed they are often called the Japanese mermaids, but I think that title doesn't do the creatures justice. Beyond the superficial similarities, there is not much to the comparison. Ningyos for one have more prominent mystic powers. As it is often the case with Eastern folklore, these creatures have warding and protective capabilities, while also signaling the coming of events. More specifically, Ningyos maintain the peace of the land with their sheer existence and can warn humans of an impending storm or unfortunate incidents. Some might also possess the ability to foretell the future or cry pearls, which would be pretty painful. They generally have a benevolent disposition, but harming them can have serious consequences. If one is caught, it will cause storms and misfortune unless thrown back into the water. However, one dying even of natural causes might be bad news, for if a Ningyo is washed ashore, it is a sure sign that war or calamity shall soon follow. Or at least this is what the legends say, but it is not necessarily the truth, even in a meta sense. You see, one of the most famous stories begins with a fisherman catching and killing a Ningyo, but as far as we know, nothing really happens to him as a result. However, let's not move on to the story just yet, as there is one more very important feature. The flesh of the creature has both a pleasant taste and fragrance, while also makes one immortal. Well, it's usually described as longevity, but said evity is so long that it might as well be immortality. As you can see, such a property would make the Ningyo a highly coveted food item, but all the calamities and curses one would be afflicted by as a result are a strong deterrent factor. In fact, when fishermen caught these animals, they always threw them back. But, as I've said, this was not always the case. The above-mentioned story tells of a man who catches a Ningyo, which he does not recognize, and decides to cook it for his friends. Who doesn't want a meal with a face resembling them? Well, the story has several versions, but it turns out the answer is quite unanimous. No one's sane. One of his guests spots the visage of the suspicious meat and either tells all his friends not to eat the meat or keeps the information to himself, being the only one that dodges the perceived bullet. In any case, he alone or all guests sneakily grab their portion of the fish to dispose of later. However, one such package makes its way home, as the man who carries it is too drunk on sake to remember. He has a young daughter who proceeds to gobble it up in its entirety. The father is initially worried that the flesh might be poisonous, but as she doesn't instantly puke her guts out, he eases up. The girl grows up and is married off, but even as her husband ages and eventually dies, she remains youthful. Following a couple more marriages and bereavement, she finally decides to continue her life as a Buddhist nun, teaching her wisdom for generations. At the age of 800 though, she returns home and either dies of old age or takes her own life. This is not the only famous story though. There is one that apparently provides evidence for the existence of Ningyos. About a century and a half ago, a Ningyo appeared to Prince Shotoku by Lake Biwa. The monster told the prince that he used to be a fisherman but plied his trade on protected waters, which caused him to be transformed into the hideous creature he was. Being on death's door, he asked the prince to display his remains in order to dissuade people from doing what he did. Thus, the prince ordered the construction of the Tensho-kyosha shrine near Fuji-Onmyeon, in which the monster's mummified body was safely deposited. So, the prince one day decided to build a shrine to an object that would keep people from fishing in waters which are out of bounds for commoners as determined by his authority. Anyway, said object still exists and is on display. While certainly an ancient piece, it is definitely not the only alleged Ningyo mummy out there. In fact, you might be more familiar with the name Fiji Mermaid, an inaccurate title meant to raise interest. This famous piece of Ningyo booty was acquired in the 1840s by Phineas Taylor Branham, an American showman known for his love of hoaxes. It was not from the Pacific Islands, but it was first featured among Fijian cannibals and got this name to better fit the show. Despite the misinformation, its origins were not a secret. This was at a time when Japan was still close to most of the Western world, so a mystical creature from unknown lands captured the imagination of many Westerners. As trading opened up in 1853, similar Ningyo started appearing in greater numbers as collectors began to take hold of their own pieces. Indeed, these figures are quite widespread today and can be found in several museums across the globe. But are they real? Can they truly be evidence of fishmen? No, of course not. There are a few articles on this matter, but I'll be focusing on one called Mermaids Uncovered, written by Paolo Viscardi and 3 others. In this 2014 manuscript for the Horniman Museum and Gardens, they used modern imaging technology to investigate the mermen held by the Horniman Museum and the Baxter Museum and Gallery. Just taking a look at these creatures is enough to see that they are not real. Indeed, these Ningyos are made from various materials, including metal wires, wood, glue, fabric and papier-mâché among others. However, we should not see these as hoaxes, for the figures hold ceremonial significance, not necessarily made to trick people but with religious intent. You can buy your own on Etsy, by the way. What a strange world we live in. So the figures are not real taxidermies, but is there any chance that there is some truth to the myth? Well, some say that the Ningyo is based on dugongs. Certainly the size seems to fit, as they are described to range from the size of a child to that of a, well, dugong to be precise. However, there might be very ugly people on the planet, but I still not call this face humanoid. Although I guess many also claim that they are the basis of other mermaid legends. There is one other weak connection that gives a bit more credence to this option though. On Okinawa Island, people refuse to eat a Ningyo as that would bring misfortune. They also do not eat dugong, which is widely consumed otherwise. Yeah, not too strong of an argument, but there you have it. There aren't many other contenders. The only fish I'd consider to have kind of a human face would be the blobfish, but even then it is rather cartoony and merely the result of a sudden change in pressure. They actually look like any old fish under normal circumstances. Since blobfish live in extreme depths, there is little chance that the species might have initiated the Ningyo legend. Plus, they are way too small. Alas, I cannot pinpoint a single animal that could be mistaken for a human fish monstrosity, so I'd say this creature is purely fantastical, with only the gaffs anchoring it to reality. Also, I cannot really move on without talking about this. A pilot for a series called The Ningyo was released in 2017. It is available for free and you can find the whole 27-minute episode on YouTube. I'll have a link for you down in the description. It's, well, okay, I guess. You can really feel that this was meant to be part of something larger, so the time they have is not used very efficiently. The story is nothing special and I cannot decide whether it means to be fantastical or grounded, maybe both. Also, most of the CGI is passable, but then there are images like these, which seem like a screenshot from an indie point-and-click adventure game. I'm pretty sure this one is a drawing too. For the amount of effort that went into a free pilot episode, you can certainly see that people who worked on it really cared. So I guess if you are really interested, it's less than 30 minutes of your time, but still, I do have some aversion towards this message. They portray and reinforce the general perception of cryptozoology, which I really dislike. As it stands for most people, including a good chunk of those well versed in the subject, all cryptids are unknown species and all reports and sightings are the truth, which should be taken at face value. All old stories are based on reality and can be taken literally. However, this is certainly not the case, as the majority of these monsters are known animals or simple hoaxes, and cryptozoology should seek the truth behind the myth, not the myth itself. For every okapi and komodo dragon there are 100 Jersey Devils and Neomilodons. It's not meant to be a documentary, but I'd have liked an approach a touch more subtle than a room full of monsters. Also, there is an anime movie which has nothing to do with actual Ningyos, and a series which I did not watch. I read a synopsis of the story. Isago revealed that she had been pregnant for 3 years by her previous husband. What? She needed mermaid flesh, so she could finally... Alright, I'm out. That's enough of moving pictures for now. I'd better go on with my specialty, picking up weird but realistic beasts. However, before I start working on my fake Ningyo, I should determine the exact version I recreate. Well, both have their pros and cons, but I'm afraid that I just go with a sea-like creature with the mermaid-like form, and we already have a similar monster in the Amish. Plus, I have not made a fish monster yet, so I'll opt for the weirder one. Making a fish convincingly resemble a human face is tough, as features like the nose or ears would have no function for such an animal. Also, fish usually have their eyes on both sides of their head, but that is not a universal characteristic. We kinda have a road template living in around Japan we can go off of, the Asian Sheepshead whereas. Now you might be asking why I did not mention this species when I was talking about potential inspirations for the Ningyo. That's quite simple. First, I would not consider this a humanoid face. Secondly, it is a widely known species, most prominently for its meat. It would be a difficult task to ignore all the supernatural factors associated with the Ningyo's flesh, as those are what make it truly unique. However, we could use this species to mold us something better. We have some nice features readily available for us. The size is about right, as it can grow pretty large, capable of reaching well beyond 1 meter in length, with the largest recorded specimen bordering on 6. The monkey-like mouth with pointed teeth also fits. Its meat is presumably tasty if it is consumed so widely. Also, with those weird growths on their head, we have material for a different shape. I should probably also say that they came to be a lot more famous when the sex changing of an individual from female to male was captured on tape. However, this is not that unique in the case of fish. Hundreds of species are capable of this, and similarly to many amphibians and reptiles, their sex upon birth is more so a result of circumstances rather than genetics. But I'm not here to talk about the naughty bits of fish, this is not that relevant to us. So our Ningyo will be a species in the same family as the Asian Sheepshead wrasse, perhaps even in the same genus. It's hard to say for certain as this wrasse is not a well-researched animal. We do know, however, that these budgies are significantly larger when they are male, and they grow continuously throughout their life, which can be quite long. I'd say that since Ningyos need to consistently resemble a face, we should put less emphasis on the budgies growing aspect, plus lean more heavily on the fact that they are hermaphroditic, so less sexual dimorphism for them. It's practically like working with wet clay. We move things around a bit. Eyes to the front, the portion where the hump head and the upper lip meet could be transformed to resemble a nose. You could have a bit of a flap to imitate an ear. That looks disturbing, but that's the point, I guess. As for the hair though, I'm struggling to find a reason for it. Obviously I'm not talking about actual hair, that's flat out impossible, but rather growths that can be interpreted as some. There are fish that do have camouflage that can almost be seen as that, but our wrasse Ningyo has no need for disguise, especially for one that only covers its head. They could be feelers, but that would be another redundant feature. There's also a fungus that can cause hair-like growths. It's the cotton mold, which has already contributed to the legend of the fur-bearing trout. I'm not a fan of using diseases and parasites to complete my monsters, but I'd be okay with it in this case. Hair is not a universal feature. It's enough if a special fungus only infects a limited number of individuals, of which only a handful advance to the hair growing stage, and some of them are found by fishermen. But since this is an anomaly, I'd not add it to the final picture. So we slap some golden shine onto it and we have our very almost real Ningyos. There are still a few features that would be impossible though. The magical protective power, curses and immortality inducing meat are obvious ones. Crying pearls? That's not desired either. Also, we should ignore the flute sound too. Fish do make various sounds, clicking, chirping or grunting to communicate. Thanks to hydrophones, we can detect the sounds puny human ears would not hear underwater. However, these songs are not meant for us. Fish do not surface to sing, as the intended recipients are not there. Due to these two factors, there would be little chance that Ningyos would be known to produce flute sounds. It might be true in the depths of the great blue, but not while trying to escape the pull of a net. Still, I think we got the most important features down. As with most creatures, tall tales would be inevitable. So let's take the impossibilities as just those. That's it for this video though. Quite an interesting monster I think, as there is a stark contrast between the western and eastern fish people. One is beautiful but usually malevolent, while the other is hideous yet generally benevolent. I think I'm going to leave the monster element to dissect instead of Ningyo for the next round through the alphabet. Season 2, I should call it, I guess. The letter O is coming up and I'm not 100% decided on that one, but I'll have another video out before then, so I'm on schedule. Not that I have a schedule.
We have been attacked by the future.
Alright, that's it from me for now. Hope to see you next time. Bye!